The gavel slammed, and the courtroom held its breath. Amara Kane, 16, stood alone, her heart a war drum in her chest, as Judge Harold Grayson's sneer cut deeper than any blade could. "You think you belong here, girl?" he spat, his voice dripping with contempt, loud enough for the whole room to hear. Amara's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the fire raging inside her. She was a black teenager in a world that had already judged her by her skin, her braided hair, her second-hand clothes. But today, in this small-town Alabama courtroom, she wasn't just fighting for herself, she was fighting for her brother, Jamal, wrongfully accused of a crime that could steal his future. The crowd murmured, a mix of pity and prejudice. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing a story. Grayson, a judge known for his iron fist and thinly veiled bias, leaned back in his chair, his pale face twisted into a smirk. "Let's hear it, then," he said, gesturing to Amara's handwritten defense papers. "Amuse me." Amara's brother, Jamal, sat in the defendant's chair, his wrists cuffed, his eyes fixed on her. He'd always called her, the smart one, the kid who devoured law books from the library while other teens scrolled social media. At 16, she'd taught herself legal precedent, memorized statutes, and dreamed of justice in a world that rarely offered it. But dreams didn't prepare her for this, a courtroom that felt like a lion's den, with Grayson as the beast. 2 weeks ago, Jamal, 19, had been arrested for allegedly stealing a car from a wealthy white neighbor, Mr. Caldwell. The evidence? A grainy security video showing a black man in a hoodie near the scene. No face, no proof, but Caldwell pointed at Jamal, and the police didn't hesitate. Amara knew her brother was innocent, been home studying for his community college exams that night. But in this town, innocence didn't matter when your skin was the wrong shade. Amara had begged for a lawyer, but their family couldn't afford one. The public defender assigned to Jamal was overworked, barely glancing at the case. So Amara stepped up, filing motions herself, poring over case law until her eyes burned. She'd gotten Jamal's case a hearing, but now, facing Grayson, she felt the weight of a system built to crush her. "Speak, girl," Grayson snapped, his voice slicing through the tense air. "Or are you wasting my time?" Amara straightened, her voice steady despite the knot in her throat. "Your Honor, my brother is innocent, and I'll prove it. The prosecution's case relies on a video that doesn't even show his face. There's no physical written evidence, just prejudice." The courtroom gasped. Grayson's face reddened. "Prejudice?" he barked, slamming his gavel again. "You dare accuse this court of such a thing?" "I'm accusing the system," Amara said, her voice rising, clear and unshaken. "The police didn't investigate. They saw a black man and stopped looking. I have evidence, witnesses, timestamps that prove Jamal was home. But no one cared to check." The crowd erupted in whispers. A reporter dropped her pen. Grayson's smirk vanished, replaced by a scowl. "You're out of line," he growled. "One more outburst, and I'll hold you in contempt." Amara's heart pounded, but she didn't back down. She held up her notes, her handwriting meticulous despite the cheap notebook. "With respect, Your Honor, I'm presenting facts. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. My brother's arrest violated that right. No probable cause, no due process." Grayson's eyes narrowed, but something flickered in them, uncertainty, maybe. Amara seized the moment. "I move for a dismissal based on insufficient evidence and procedural violations. The prosecution's case is built on assumptions, not proof." The prosecutor, a wiry man named Dawson, jumped up. "This is absurd. She's not even a lawyer." "She's making more sense than you," a voice called from the back. It was Mrs. Thompson, an elderly black woman who ran the local diner. The crowd stirred, some nodding, others glaring. Grayson banged his gavel, his face now a storm cloud. "Silence. I won't have my courtroom turned into a circus." He pointed at Amara. You think you can lecture me on the law? I've been a judge longer than you've been alive. And yet you haven't read the Constitution, Amara shot back, her voice trembling with passion. The room froze. Even Jamal's eyes widened. Amara knew she was risking everything, but she couldn't stop. The 14th Amendment guarantees equal protection. My brother's been denied that because of his skin. If you ignore the evidence, you're complicit. The word, complicit, hit like a thunderbolt. Grayson's hand froze mid-air, his gavel hovering. The crowd held its collective breath. Dawson sputtered, "This is outrageous." But Amara wasn't done. She pulled out a stack of papers, her research, her lifeline. I have affidavits from 3 neighbors who saw Jamal at home during the alleged crime. I have a time-stamped receipt from a delivery app proving he was there. And I have case law Miranda v. Arizona, Brady versus Maryland showing the prosecution's failure to disclose exculpatory evidence violates due process. The courtroom was a powder keg. Grayson's face paled, his confidence cracking. He'd mocked her, called her a child, but now her words sharp, precise, undeniable hung in the air like a challenge. "You're trying to play lawyer," he said, but his voice lacked its earlier venom. "Those papers mean nothing without proper submission." "Then let me submit them," Amara said, stepping forward, her eyes locked on his. "Or are you afraid of the truth?" The crowd gasped again. Mrs. Thompson stood, clapping slowly, and a few others joined her. Grayson's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by a black teenager from the wrong side of town. But Amara wasn't just any teenager. She'd spent years studying law to protect her family, her community, from a system that saw them as less. Dawson, sensing the shift, scrambled to regain control. "Your Honor, this girl's theatrics are irrelevant. The evidence is fabricated," Amara interrupted, her voice cutting through like a blade. "The security video shows a man in a hoodie, but it's too blurry to identify anyone. Mr. Caldwell's accusation is based on nothing but bias. I can prove it." She held up a photo, enlarged and grainy, from the security footage. "This hoodie has a red logo. My brother doesn't own one like it. I have his clothing inventory documented. The police never checked." Grayson's eyes darted to the photo, then back to Amara. For the first time, he looked unsteady. "You expect me to believe you over a respected citizen like Mr. Caldwell?" "I expect you to believe the evidence," Amara said, her voice steady as steel. "Unless you think justice is just for people like him." The room exploded in murmurs. Reporters typed furiously, their eyes wide. Mrs. Thompson shouted, "Tell him, Amara." A few others cheered, while Caldwell, sitting in the front row, shifted uncomfortably, his face flushed. Grayson slammed his gavel, but the sound was weaker now, less certain. "Order," he bellowed, but his authority was slipping. He leaned forward, glaring at Amara. "You're treading on thin ice, young lady. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know exactly who I'm dealing with," Amara said, her voice low but fierce. "A man who thinks he can mock me because of who I am. But I'm not here to be mocked. I'm here for justice." The crowd roared, some in support, others in outrage. Jamal's eyes glistened with pride, but Amara didn't see it was locked in a stare-down with Grayson, her heart pounding but her resolve unbreakable. She'd come prepared to fight, and she wasn't backing down. Grayson's hand shook slightly as he pointed at her. "You're out of your depth. This isn't a game." "It's not a game," Amara agreed. "It's my brother's life. And I'm going to save it." The tension was palpable, the air thick with anticipation. Grayson opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time in years, he was speechless, confronted by a truth he couldn't dismiss. Amara's evidence, her logic, her unyielding courage, they were dismantling his world, one word at a time. Dawson jumped in, desperate to break the spell. "Your Honor, this is a mockery of the court. She's just a kid. A kid who knows the law better than you, Mrs. Thompson called out, earning a ripple of laughter from the crowd. Grayson's face was a mask of fury, but his eyes betrayed doubt. He glanced at Amara's papers, then at the crowd, then back at her. "You think you can walk in here and lecture me?" he said, his voice quieter now, almost strained. "I'm not lecturing," Amara said, her voice softening but no less powerful. "I'm begging you to do what's right. My brother's innocent. The evidence proves it. All I'm asking is for you to look at it." The courtroom fell silent. Every eye was on Grayson, waiting for his next move. Amara stood tall, her papers clutched tightly, her heart a beacon of hope in a sea of prejudice. She'd laid bare the truth, not just about Jamal's case, but about a system that judged her before she even spoke. Grayson's gavel hovered, his hand trembling. The room waited, breathless, for his response. The silence in the courtroom was deafening, a fragile thread stretched taut, ready to snap. Judge Harold Grayson's gavel hung in the air, his eyes locked on Amara Kane, a 16-year-old black girl who'd just turned his world upside down. Her words echoed in his mind: justice, evidence, prejudice, each one a dagger to his authority. Amara stood firm, her heart racing but her stance unyielding. She'd presented her case, affidavits, timestamps, and legal precedent, all meticulously gathered by a teenager who'd never set foot in a law school. Her brother Jamal's freedom hung in the balance, and she wasn't about to let Grayson's bias steal it. The judge cleared his throat, his voice rough. "Miss Kane," he said, each word deliberate, "you've made bold claims. But this court operates on procedure, not passion." "Then follow procedure," Amara replied, her voice steady but burning with conviction. "Review the evidence. Rule on my motion to dismiss. That's your job, Your Honor." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Thompson, the diner owner, nodded fiercely, her hands clasped as if in prayer. Mr. Caldwell, the accuser, shifted in his seat, his earlier confidence fading. The reporters scribbled faster, sensing a story that could make headlines far beyond this small Alabama town. Grayson's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone like Amara, black, and fearless. But her evidence was undeniable, her logic airtight. He glanced at the prosecutor, Dawson, who looked like a man drowning. "Mr. Dawson," Grayson said, "do you have a response to the defendant's sister's claims?" Dawson fumbled, flipping through his notes. "Your Honor, the prosecution stands by the evidence presented. The security footage clearly shows." A blurry figure in a hoodie, Amara cut in, her voice sharp. "Not my brother. I've submitted proof he was home, witness statements, a receipt, even his phone's GPS data. You didn't investigate because you didn't care." Dawson's face reddened. "You're not a lawyer," he snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. "I don't need a degree to tell the truth," Amara said, her eyes blazing. She turned to Grayson. "Your Honor, the prosecution violated Brady v. Maryland by withholding exculpatory evidence. That's grounds for dismissal. You know it." The crowd buzzed, the air electric with tension. Grayson's hand twitched, the gavel still hovering. He was cornered, and he knew it. If he ignored Amara's evidence, he'd expose his bias to the world. If he acknowledged it, he'd have to admit he was wrong. "Enough," Grayson said, his voice low but dangerous. "I'll review the evidence. Court is recessed for 1 hour." He slammed the gavel, the sound echoing like a gunshot. As the crowd dispersed, Amara exhaled, her knees weak but her spirit unbroken. Jamal reached for her hand, his cuffs clinking. "You're incredible," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I didn't know you could do this." "I had to," Amara said, squeezing his hand. "For you. For us." Outside the courtroom, the hallway was a storm of voices. Reporters swarmed Amara, microphones thrust in her face. "Miss Kane, how did you learn the law? Are you accusing the judge of racism? What's next for your brother? Amara pushed through, her focus on the fight ahead. Mrs. Thompson caught her arm, her eyes shining. You're a warrior, child. This town's never seen anything like you. But not everyone was on her side. A group of Caldwell's neighbors stood nearby, muttering. She's just stirring trouble, one said. That family's no good. Amara ignored them, but their words stung, a reminder of the prejudice she'd fought her whole life. Back in the courtroom, the hour felt like an eternity. Amara sat beside Jamal, reviewing her notes, her mind racing. She'd prepared for this moment, but doubt crept in. What if Grayson dismissed her evidence? What if the system won, as it always seemed to? When the court reconvened, the tension was thicker than ever. Grayson took his seat, his face unreadable. Miss Kane, he said, I've reviewed your submissions. The affidavits, the receipt, the phone data theory compelling. Amara's heart leaped, but she stayed silent, waiting. However, Grayson continued, his voice hardening, this court cannot dismiss a case based on the arguments of an untrained teenager. Procedure must be followed. The crowd gasped. Dawson smirked, regaining his footing. Amara felt the air leave her lungs, but she refused to crumble. Your Honor, she said, standing, procedure doesn't mean ignoring the truth. You've seen the evidence. If you deny my motion, you're choosing bias over justice. The room erupted. Mrs. Thompson shouted, shame on you. A reporter yelled, is that on the record? Grayson's gavel pounded, but the chaos grew. Order. Grayson roared, his face crimson. One more outburst, and I'll clear this courtroom. Amara didn't flinch. You can clear the room, but you can't clear the truth. My brother's innocent, and I'll keep fighting until you see it. Grayson stared at her, his eyes a storm of conflict. For a moment, he seemed human, not a judge, but a man grappling with his own flaws. Then, slowly, he leaned back. Miss Kane, he said, his voice quieter, I'll allow your evidence to be formally submitted. The court will appoint a new public defender to review your claims. We'll reconvene in 1 week. It wasn't a victory, but it was a crack in the wall. Amara nodded, her heart pounding with cautious hope. Thank you, Your Honor. As the gavel fell, the crowd buzzed with a mix of awe and anger. Jamal hugged Amara, his voice breaking. You did it, sis. You gave me a chance. But the fight wasn't over. Over the next week, Amara worked tirelessly with the new public defender, Ms. Carter, a sharp woman who'd been following the case on the news. You're a prodigy, Ms. Carter said, poring over Amara's notes. This town doesn't deserve you. Amara smiled faintly. It's not about the town. It's about my brother. The story spread like wildfire. Local news ran headlines, teen challenges judge in racial bias case. Activists rallied outside the courthouse, chanting for justice. But Caldwell and his supporters pushed back, calling Amara a troublemaker, a liar. The town split down the middle, old wounds of race and class torn open. On the day of the reconvened hearing, the courtroom was packed. Grayson looked weary, the weight of the week's scrutiny heavy on him. Ms. Carter stood beside Amara, presenting the case with precision, but it was Amara's evidence that carried the day. The affidavits, the receipt, the phone data all painted a clear picture: Jamal was innocent. Grayson listened, his face impassive. When Ms. Carter finished, he turned to Dawson. Do you have anything to add? Dawson stammered, his case crumbling. The prosecution rests, Your Honor. The room held its breath. Grayson leaned forward, his voice steady but softer than before. Based on the evidence presented, I find insufficient grounds to proceed. The case against Jamal Kane is dismissed. The crowd erupted in cheers. Jamal pulled Amara into a crushing hug, tears streaming down his face. Mrs. Thompson sobbed, clapping wildly. Even some of Caldwell's neighbors looked shaken, their certainty wavering. Amara felt a weight lift, but her heart was still heavy. She'd won this battle, but the war against prejudice was far from over. As she and Jamal left the courtroom, reporters swarmed again, but Amara had only one thing to say: justice isn't given, it's fought for. In the weeks that followed, Amara's story inspired thousands. She received letters from law schools, offers of scholarships, and messages from kids like her, saying she'd given them hope. Jamal enrolled in college, his dreams intact. Grayson retired quietly, his reputation forever tied to the girl who'd humbled him. But the town remained divided. Some saw Amara as a hero, others as a threat. The fight for equality continued, raw and unresolved. Amara knew she'd sparked something bigger than herself, a call to question, to challenge, to demand better. What do you think? Where does justice stand in a world divided by prejudice? Share your thoughts on right, wrong, and the fight for fairness.